He said with a fake smile, she offended you, so naturally, it's your call. She looked up at Fu Xinqing and said calmly, I don't know what to do with her. If I knew, I would have done it long ago. Fu Xinqing wore a faint smile as he continued his probing questions. Bald head chopped off Liang Yuan's finger. If I hadn't stopped you, would you have taken his finger as revenge? He Yan pursed her lips, her determination unwavering. Yes, she admitted without hesitation. Fu Xinqing's smile widened, his eyes gleaming with amusement. You're really eager to see me gone, aren't you? To his playful accusation, He Yan responded with conviction, of course. Relaxing on the sofa, Fu Xinqing tilted his head slightly to gaze at her, his tone turning serious. Then why hesitate when it comes to dealing with Yu Jia? He Yan met his cold gaze with her own calm resolve. While I agree that someone who stirs up trouble on the internet deserves to face consequences, Yu Jia was once my student, and she addressed me as her teacher. Fu Xinqing maintained his unwavering stare. He Yan, this hesitation doesn't suit you. This person deserves punishment, and your connection to her shouldn't deter you. With her gaze lowered, He Yan replied softly, I understand that you want to help me vent my anger. I appreciate that, but I just don't want to. He Yan attempted to diffuse the situation by gently placing her hand on Fu Xinqing's thigh and saying softly, just pretend that I don't know. Didn't you say it's my call? Well, I've decided to let Yu Jia go, and I'll just pretend this never happened. However, Fu Xinqing abruptly grabbed her wrist, removing her hand from his leg. He stared at her with indifference and said coldly, He Yan, do you know the saying, to be foolish enough to reject a face-saving offer? Meeting his cold gaze, He Yan took a deep breath and leaned closer to his ear, speaking in a hushed tone, you also need to understand that as Fu Xinqing, the president of the Fu Enterprise, you can't display your emotions so openly. You're not Shinjijia, the street gangster who only knows how to fight and kill, so, don't lose your dignity in front of a crowd. Fu Xinqing tightened his grip on her wrist, his eyes filled with fierceness. Through gritted teeth, he muttered, fair enough. Well done, He Yan. Despite the pain in her wrist and her already pale face, He Yan managed a smile and replied, thank you for the compliment. Gradually, Fu Xinqing's expression calmed down a bit. When he finally reverted to his usual apathetic demeanor, he released her wrist and said indifferently, go ahead, Teacher Yan. Take your student out of here. Hurry before I change my mind. He Yan wasted no time. She immediately walked in front of Yu Jia and helped her up from the ground. As they headed towards the exit of Night Blitz, Yu Jia slowed down and asked in a hesitant voice, Teacher Yan, don't you hate me? Why did you save me? He Yan turned to look at her and replied with a heavy voice, hate? So what? Should I have just stood there and watched them beat you to death, or let them cruelly abuse you? In a stern tone, He Yan advised, go home and stay with your parents for 2 years. As long as you have hands and feet, no matter how poor you are, you won't go hungry. You're young and have a long life ahead of you, so don't waste it. After a while, Xiao Wu called for more wine. Unexpectedly, the waiter who brought it was inexperienced, and in their nervousness, they let go of the glass before Fu Xinqing could take it, causing half of the wine to spill on him. The waiter hurriedly apologized, saying, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Xiao Wu was about to reprimand the waiter, but Fu Xinqing raised his hand to stop him. He looked at the young waiter and commented, I've seen you before. The waiter paused, gazing up at Fu Xinqing with pleasant surprise, and nervously asked, Mr. Fu, do you still remember me? Fu Xinqing cracked a faint grin and pointed at her, saying, from the Economic Forum. The young waiter was delighted and nodded vigorously, saying, you have a really good memory. I thought you wouldn't remember me, just a little fan. Seeing this interaction, Xiao Wu, who didn't know who the girl was, caught on that Fu Xinqing knew her. He interrupted with a smile, what a coincidence. You two have met again here. Fate, this is fate. Sit down and have a good chat. By the way, what's your name? The young girl was none other than Chen Hegua, the daughter of police officer Chen. She grinned and replied, Guo Chen. My name is Guo Chen. Xiao Wu raised his hand and said, come here, sit down. Mr. Fu is in a bad mood today. If you make him laugh, I'll ask your manager to give you a raise. Fu Xinqing, who had been mostly silent until now, told her to scram softly. Chen Hegua smiled brightly and took a seat beside Fu Xinqing. She spoke with the innocence of a young girl, saying, Mr. Fu, let me tell you a joke. I'm the best at telling jokes. Xiao Wu suggested a game, where Chen Hegua would tell a joke, and if Fu Xinqing laughed, he would take a shot, but if he didn't, she would. Fu Xinqing looked at Chen Hegua with a smile and asked if she dared to play. Chen Hegua's eyes sparkled with excitement, and she nodded vigorously, responding confidently, I dare. Chen Hegua began telling several jokes in a row, trying to elicit a smile from Fu Xinqing, but his face remained stoic, showing no sign of amusement. Following the rules of the game, Chen Hegua had to take several shots one after another. Her already flushed face became even redder, and her speech grew increasingly incoherent as she struggled to tell jokes that failed to land. After numerous attempts, Fu Xinqing finally allowed the corner of his lips to twitch ever so slightly. Chen Hegua, recognizing her success, pointed at him and shouted excitedly, "You laughed! You laughed! I won! I won!" In an uncharacteristic act of kindness, Fu Xinqing turned to Xiao Wu and instructed, "Take her out and make sure someone keeps an eye on her. Don't let anything happen." As Fu Xinqing prepared to leave, Xiao Wu grinned mischievously and teased, "Brother Xing, don't leave today. Stay here. Sister Hua has prepared a special gift for you upstairs." Curious, Fu Xinqing inquired, "What gift?" Xiao Wu replied with a playful smile, "You'll find out when you go upstairs." In the luxurious presidential suite, Fu Xinqing emerged from the shower, casually lifting the thin quilt on the bed. There, he discovered the young woman peacefully slumbering in the dim light cast by the wall lamp. Fu Xinqing couldn't help but smirk slightly before settling down for some rest. Some time later, on the other side of the large bed, a figure stirred in the dim light. Chen Hegua, still groggy from sleep and nursing a pounding headache, moaned softly while clutching her head. As she turned her head and caught sight of the man lying beside her, fear coursed through her, and her breath caught in her throat. She couldn't fathom how she had ended up here or how she had shared a bed with him. Thankfully, she didn't sense anything inappropriate, perhaps because he had been too intoxicated to make advances. After a few moments, when she had regained her composure, she inched closer to him and softly called out, "Mr. Fu, Mr. Fu." With no response forthcoming, Chen Hegua breathed a sigh of relief. She cautiously lifted the thin quilt, slipped out of bed, and tiptoed across the room in search of a clean sheet of white paper. The paper would serve as a means to capture Fu Xinqing's fingerprints, and she handled it with care, pressing his fingers onto it one by one. Unbeknownst to her, the man on the bed had already awakened during her clandestine operation. Fu Xinqing had been pondering He Yan and her earlier conversation with this young girl in the hotel. She had interceded for the girl, requesting his autograph. He found himself contemplating the soy milk she had asked him to pass her that morning. She had sipped it without hesitation, unperturbed by its source, all because she had been engrossed in a phone call. Could someone like her truly put aside her grievances against him just for a phone call? As Chen Hegua diligently collected his fingerprints, Fu Xinqing suddenly tilted the corner of his lips into a faint smile and hoarsely asked, "Are you awake?" Chen Hegua's throat constricted, nearly robbing her of her voice, but she managed a silent nod. "Yes, I'm awake." Fu Xinqing observed her intently. Just as she felt beads of sweat forming on her brow, he seized her wrist and deftly pulled her down onto the bed. He clutched his phone, his voice low and menacing as he instructed, "Call her, or else I'll make your life a living hell." Meanwhile, He Yan had driven Yu Jia to Nanqing University and reassured her that none of the other students knew about her situation, alleviating her worries about staying in the dorms. Yu Jia expressed her gratitude, stepping out of the car. He Yan took a deep breath, contemplating whether she should call Fu Xinqing. She considered exchanging a few words with him, maybe even venting her frustrations, as a way to find some closure. Just as she reached for her phone, an incoming call disrupted her thoughts. It was from Fu Xinqing, a surprise as he rarely initiated contact at such times. She wondered what he wanted. However, as she answered the call and was about to say, "Hello," the sounds coming through the phone were far from ordinary. The girl's voice oscillated between cries for help, please, and intermittent screams. He Yan's initial shock soon transformed into a mixture of bewilderment and disgust. Unfortunately, she wasn't in the mood to entertain his games, she felt nothing but revulsion and boredom. As she moved her finger to disconnect the call, a girl's cry, one she couldn't mistake, pierced through the cacophony. The girl on the other end was none other than Chen Hegua. Panicking, He Yan urgently called out to Fu Xinqing, "Who's with you?" In response, Fu Xinqing's voice dripped with amusement as he leisurely intoned, "What should I do, He Yan? I don't feel like letting her go." With those words, he abruptly ended the call. He Yan impatiently tried calling Fu Xinqing back, but his phone was switched off. After a moment's contemplation, she dialed Mother Chen's number. As soon as Mother Chen answered, He Yan asked with a sense of urgency, "Mother Chen, is Guogua at home?" Mother Chen sensed the unease in He Yan's voice but replied calmly, "Miss Yan, Guogua left for her friend's birthday party. She mentioned something about Chongqing Villa." He Yan swallowed hard, her thoughts racing. Guogua might be with Fu Xinqing right now. The old woman's voice, once calm and composed, now trembled with panic and anxiety. She implored He Yan desperately, He Yan, where is she? Where is Fu Xinqing? See, can we call the police? He Yan fell into a prolonged silence, torn by indecision and internal turmoil. She struggled to determine the right course of action. On the other end of the line, the old woman sensed He Yan's hesitation and inner conflict. She pleaded with a quavering voice, "Teacher He, I beg you, please save Guogua. She's just a child. My son is gone, and Guogua is all I have left. I don't want her to take care of me as I grow old. I only want her to be safe so that I can face my late son with peace when my time comes." He Yan closed her eyes slowly, her voice wavering, and replied unevenly, "Mother Chen, don't worry. I will bring Guogua back." With a sense of urgency, He Yan found Ah Jiang's number in her phone and dialed it. Skipping any pleasantries, she got straight to the point, her words terse and commanding. "I'm right outside the door of the apartment. Come down and open the door for me." Ah Jiang responded promptly, "Ms. He, we're not at home." "Night Blitz, you are still at Night Blitz, aren't you?" He Yan's voice dripped with sarcasm. "Fine, go find Fu Xinqing and tell him I'll be there right away." As He Yan accelerated toward Night Blitz, her mind raced. She needed a partner, someone bold, composed, and unwavering in the face of adversity. Mother Chen, plagued by her own physical limitations and the emotional connection to her granddaughter, was incapable of handling the situation. So who could assist her in this dire hour? A name suddenly surfaced in He Yan's thoughts. She called Su Chenhua and spoke urgently, "Now, don't ask questions. Come out immediately to the west gate of the university." When Su Chenhua arrived near her car, He Yan paused, then explained, "Get in, don't ask questions for now. I'm going to rescue a girl. I'll keep you informed about my location. If possible, I'll handle it alone. But if the situation turns dire, call the police immediately. Understand?" Su Chenhua replied without hesitation, "Teacher Yan, don't take unnecessary risks. Just wait for me. I'll go in and rescue her." He Yan had already reached Night Blitz. Without going into detail with Su Chenhua, she instructed him sternly. "Put on your earphones, and don't let anyone suspect anything. Stay quiet." Su Chenhua complied, saying, "Yes, ma'am." With her phone in her coat pocket, He Yan stepped out of the car and hurried into the lobby. She grabbed a foreman, her tone icy, and asked, "Where are the guest rooms?" The foreman tried to placate her, saying, "Ms. Yan, please calm down first and we can have a conversation." He Yan took a decisive action, grabbing the foreman's tie and pulling him closer. In a low voice, she warned, "Think very carefully. Right now, you're on the precipice, risking your life for Fu Xinqing. To him, you're expendable, but I'm different. I hold grudges." The man's eyes darted around nervously, and he managed an apologetic smile. "Ms. Yan, please calm down. The back garden is quite deep. If you make a scene, you'll alarm all the guests. Mr. Fu won't be pleased. Smart individuals don't need explicit explanations." He Yan tugged at the corner of her lips and forcefully pushed the man away. She shouted angrily, "Don't stop me, get out of my way. I know where Fu Xinqing is." He Yan rushed into the corridor and reached the back door of the clubhouse building. Crossing a small garden, she arrived at the deepest part of the villa and halted. She began conveying her every step to Su Chenhua over the phone. Just ahead, Ah Jiang had already opened the villa's door. He stared at He Yan with an impassive expression as she stormed in, her voice cold and demanding. "Where is Fu Xinqing? Where is he?" She shouted, and rushed straight in, casting Ah Jiang aside. As He Yan reached the second floor and was about to forcefully open a door, it swung open from the inside. Fu Xinqing stood there, now dressed in a simple shirt and trousers, his expression stern and unyielding. He looked at He Yan with a cold voice and asked, "He Yan, have you gone mad? What do you want to do?" These words stirred He Yan's heart, and a bold thought suddenly popped up in her mind. Maybe that phone call was just an accident, and this incident was just a coincidence. Fu Xinqing did not know Chen Hegua's identity, nor did he know of her cooperation with the Chens. Maybe she could save Chen Hegua without making a fuss. She asked him back, "What do I want to do?" "I'll do whatever you want." This woman, even when she was looking death in the face, did not yield, and even dared to play tricks on him. This got Fu Xinqing fuming and furious. He deliberately led her the wrong way, and asked mockingly, "Don't tell me you came here to be jealous." He Yan inadvertently raised her eyebrows and smiled. "Jealous? If this can make you stop quarreling with me about Yujia's matter, then I'll play along." "Fine, I'll be jealous. As long as it makes you happy," she said, pushing past him, then sneered at him and said, "Since I've caught you two red-handed, should I now go grab and snatch the mistress's hair?" "I'm really sorry, I can't act out that part, I'm afraid." She abruptly stopped in the middle of her words. Chen Hegua stood in the living room, fully dressed, looking calm and still. He Yen suddenly turned her head to look at Fu Xinqing, whose face was still dull. There was a hint of ridicule in the slight curve of his lips. He glanced at her, but said to Chen Hegua, "You can go." When passing by her, she seemed to hesitate for a moment, then explained nervously, pretty sister, what happened today was just a misunderstanding. Nothing happened between me and Mr. Fu. Yen thought Hegua called her pretty sister, the same name she called her when they first met in the hotel. Did she want to say that Fu Xinqing didn't know her identity yet? "Ah Jiang, take her down," Fu Xinqing ordered Ah Jiang outside the door with a calm and gentle tone. Fu Xinqing closed the door. He turned around and looked at He Yen, a smile slowly forming on his lips. He asked her, "You know her?" She tried to maintain her final composure, frowned, and said, "What's going on? Isn't she the girl who asked for your autograph back at the hotel?" Fu Xinqing approached her step by step. "Really? Is she just a girl who asked for my autograph?" He Yen raised her chin and asked in a cold voice, "Fu Xinqing, what's wrong with you?" Fu Xinqing sneered suddenly, threw a phone at her, and asked her, "He Yen, do you think you are too smart or do you think I am too stupid?" Fu Xinqing supported himself by putting both hands on the back of the sofa, leaning down to trap her, and asked slowly, word by word, "What made you think you could save her by coming here? Is it your ridiculous cleverness, or that you are my mistress? That I let you do whatever with Baldhead's hand, or that I tolerated you taking Yu Jia away today?" He Yan's body still seemed to remember, trembling instinctively. Fu Xinqing asked her softly, "He Yan, what are you relying on? Can you stop me from doing what I want if you come?" He Yan's lips trembled, and she strained to say, "Fu Xinqing, have some humanity, okay? She is only 18 years old, just a child. You have already killed her father, and now you want to ruin her life again." Fu Xinqing smiled ruthlessly, "You can't even protect yourself, but you want to save her?" She raised her eyes to look straight at Fu Xinqing, and asked, "Then what do you think I should do? Helplessly watch you ruin her, then have others ruin her, and make a video of her like before?" "Fu Xinqing, I have nothing I can rely on, what I rely on is only my conscience." Fu Xinqing was slightly taken aback, but immediately became even angrier, and said coldly, "Well then. I'll show you what your stupid conscience can do." Saying that, he turned around to leave. In desperation, He Yen quickly grabbed him. She couldn't care less about anything else, and put all her effort into hugging him tightly from behind, crying and begging, "Shinjijia, I beg you, don't do those things again, okay? That's right, I'm relying on your feelings for me. I know you like me a little bit now, that's why I act so proud, that's why I act confident." Fu Xinqing became still. He raised his hand to hold her face, slowly wiped away her tears with his fingertips, and asked, "You know I like you a little?" He Yen closed her eyes and nodded, saying in a shy voice, "I know." Fu Xinqing scoffed, and said softly, "But all you want in your heart is to kill me." "I don't." He Yen hastily defended, but fearing that Fu Xinqing would not believe her, she hurriedly said, "I just said those cruel words to purposely anger you. Besides, you did so many things to me, so naturally, I would hate you. But I also feel that you treat me well now, and seem to like me a little, so I can't help but touch your bottom line, again and again, to see if you really like me." Such seemingly sincere words were half true and half false. If he hadn't known what she and the Chens were doing secretly, he would have been deceived by her again. These two people were facing each other, their bodies were close to each other, but their hearts were very far apart, each having different thoughts. Fu Xinqing smiled lightly and asked her suddenly, Yen, tell me, what are you planning now?" Her serene and deep pupils constricted quite obviously. Fu Xinqing's smile was full of sarcasm, as he said, "I really want to strangle you to death, but again it's such a pity for interesting prey like you to die so easily." Suddenly he heard someone knocking on the door. Ah Zhang's calm voice said, "Mr. Fu, the police are here." Someone called the police and said we have detained Miss Yen and her friend. Fu Xinqing paused. After a while, he looked at He Yen again, with a slight sneer on his lips. He asked her quietly, "This is what you're really relying on, isn't it?" The living room downstairs was by no means small, but it became crowded because of the arrival of the police. Fu Xinqing was still as calm and composed as ever, but Chen Hegua took the initiative to explain, "I think this is just a misunderstanding. Nothing actually happened. Mr. Fu didn't detain me nor hurt me." Immediately, Su Chenhua yelled at Chen Hegua angrily, "Are you crazy? Teacher Yen took such a risk to save you, and you say you are fine. How cheap are you?" Chen Hegua felt embarrassed and wronged by Su Chenhua's chiding, and said angrily, "I don't know what you're talking about." Su Chenhua wanted to argue with her, but was interrupted softly by He Yan, whose eyes were lowered. Stop talking. Among the plainclothes police officers who came was a friend of Officer Chen. He deliberately asked her in a gentle voice, Guogua, what's going on here? Teacher Yan called your grandma. When your grandma learned that you were with this Mr. Fu, she almost lost it. Hearing that her grandma knew, she hurriedly said, Uncle, I'm fine. Mr. Fu had a misunderstanding. He really didn't do anything to me. Just before you came, he was just about to ask someone to take me home. Fu Xinqing sneered, Officer, I'm afraid we really just had a misunderstanding. He looked at Yan and said, Could you confirm this for me, Teacher Yan? Yan bit corners of her lips but said, My sincere apologies, officer, it was me being jealous and competitive. In a moment of anxiety I made someone report. A policeman who came with Su Chenhua couldn't help but be disappointed, and criticized him. What are you guys doing? Do you know that this is a false police report? Intentionally lying to the police affects normal police processing. We can take you in custody for this. Su Chenhua blushed and wanted to defend himself, but He Yan pulled him aside. She lowered her head and admitted her mistake to the policeman. I'm sorry, officer, we made a mistake. We didn't mean it. Fu Xinqing waited until the criminal police team was leaving with Chenhua, then he suddenly asked her, Your name is Chenhua, isn't it? Chenhua's lie was exposed. She felt a little embarrassed and nodded, yes. Unexpectedly, Fu Xinqing just grinned lightly and said, Nice name, why lie? Chenhua blushed and said meekly, I didn't do it on purpose. He Yan and Su Chenhua also left with the police. Fu Xinqing did not stop her, and even said very politely and reasonably when sending everyone out, Goodbye, Teacher Yan. He Yan already understood that she had lost everything, utter defeat. At his words, stopped walking, turned around to see him, and praised, Fu Xinqing, you're good, I have to admit. Really, it's not easy to get such praise from Teacher Yan. He gently pulled the corner of his lower lip, and asked again, I wonder what Teacher Yan is planning next. What plan? All her previous efforts were in vain, and she was about to face his crazy revenge soon. What else could she have planned? It was the first time she had the thought of giving up. She replied, Prepare for a funeral. Is that okay with you? Fu Xinqing's eyes darkened, shook his head, and said, You won't, He Yan, you won't. Yeah, I won't, I'm such a strong person. He Yan turned around and walked away. Mother Chen had also arrived, and she was just getting out of the car with a cane. When she saw her granddaughter coming out, she staggered towards her. Mother Chen looked her up and down with red eyes. When she was finally sure that her granddaughter was not hurt, Mother Chen raised her hand suddenly, and slapped her in the face. Chenhua covered her face and looked at Grandma in disbelief, and called in a daze, Grandma. Mother Chen looked at He Yan, who came out from behind, and said in a trembling voice, Teacher Yan, I am very sorry. I didn't educate my granddaughter well, and caused you great trouble. He Yan smiled helplessly and said to Mother Chen, I have tried my best. After tonight, I don't know what will happen to me. Take care of yourself and Guogua. Suddenly, Chenhua got angry, and shouted, If it wasn't for your terrible actions, Fu Xinqing wouldn't even know who I am. You ran over out of nowhere and made a fuss, screwed up everything, and now blame others. Mother Chen was so furious, she was speechless. She pointed at her granddaughter and said, Let's go, I'll take you back. She drove Su Chenhua back to school. Su Chenhua hesitated to speak several times, until he finally called out softly, Teacher Yan, I want to help you. He Yan smiled lightly, and said, Su Chenhua, I am very grateful for what you did for me today, but now, I can rely only on myself. The day after, she sat quietly on the sofa, holding her phone in a daze. She sent a short message to Fu Xinqing, asking him, Can my death be the end of your game? I will bet my life to play your game. In exchange, don't harm my family. I'll be very grateful to you. After the message was sent, she turned off her phone, took the blade from the coffee table. Fu Xinqing was preparing to have a meeting when he received He Yan's text message. Glancing at the content of the message, he was startled but then smirked sarcastically. Fu Xinqing didn't believe it. For such a woman, even if you put a knife to her neck, she would still struggle. How could she choose to end her life by herself? Moreover, what if she really died? For him, it was just the loss of an interesting plaything and a game that ended early. He picked up the phone, and replied to He Yan's text, purposely asking her, What method of death will you choose? She didn't reply. Time passed, and his phone remained extremely quiet, no activity. Fu Xinqing frowned unconsciously. He called her directly again, but unexpectedly, the phone was turned off. The meeting was still in progress, but Fu Xinqing abruptly stood up. He coldly ordered Ah Jiang, who was seated beside him, Get the car ready, and check where He Yan is at the moment.